By late August, the Bradley farm looked tired. The corn was tall and dry at the edge of Mapleton, Kansas, and the sun had baked the dirt paths pale and hard. Crows sat on the fence posts like black judges, watching the fields. Ethan Bradley stood beside the pumpkin patch with a tape measure in one hand and a bucket of water in the other. The biggest pumpkin was still there, round and bright orange, about as wide as a washtub. It sat on a bed of straw under a patchy white tarp. Ethan had checked it every morning all summer. He had fed it, turned it, covered it when the sun was too hot, and pulled weeds until his hands hurt. His dad, Mark Bradley, came up the row with a wrench in one hand and a worried look on his face. His shirt was dark with sweat. "I got the part number again," Mark said. "Dealer says the combine piece won't be cheap." Ethan looked over at the machine sitting near the machine shed. The old combine had one side open like a broken jaw. Last week, a metal chain had snapped inside it during a test run. The farm would need that part before harvest began. "How much?" Ethan asked. Mark let out a slow breath. "More than I wanted. Way more than I wanted." Ethan did not need more than that. He already knew what the county fair prize meant. The giant pumpkin contest at the Maple County Fair paid enough, if their pumpkin did well, to cover the repair. It was a big hope for one orange thing sitting in the dirt. His mom, Linda Bradley, called from the porch. "Supper's almost ready. Come wash up." Ethan gave the pumpkin one last look before he went in. It had done well all summer. He had even started to think it might win. That night, the weather changed. The air grew hot and still after dark. Then all at once, the wind came hard out of the north. It slapped the side of the house and made the old kitchen window rattle. Ethan woke up and stared at the ceiling. He could hear things moving outside. A trash can rolled once and tipped over. Then the wind hit again, stronger this time. He pulled on his boots and walked to the kitchen. His mom was already there, looking out the window with both hands on the sink. "Your dad's outside," she said. Ethan found Mark at the back door with a flashlight and a coil of rope. "The tarp might lift," Mark said. "Help me tie it down." They went out into the dark. The wind pushed at Ethan's chest. Grass bent flat. The tarp over the pumpkin snapped like a sail. Mark and Ethan held it down and tied the corners to stakes. Mud splashed around their boots. The pumpkin wobbled on its straw bed. Then a sharp crack cut through the wind. Ethan turned just in time to see one side of the pumpkin split open near the stem. The crack ran down 2 inches, then 3. A gust shoved the whole pumpkin sideways. One edge slid off the straw and sank into the wet ditch beside the patch. Mud sucked at it with a low, ugly sound. "No, no, no," Ethan said. He and his dad ran to it. The pumpkin had not broken apart, but the crack had opened more. A wet line of orange flesh showed in the flashlight beam. The wind shoved rainless dust and dry leaves across the yard, but the ditch below the patch was full of old water from the last storm. The pumpkin had settled deep into the mud. Mark pulled at it with both hands and could not move it an inch. "Get the tractor," Ethan said. Mark shook his head once. "Not in this dark. Not in this mud. We'll just make it worse." The wind blew a screen door shut behind them with a bang. Ethan stood there, breathing hard, staring at the pumpkin half sunk in the ditch. All that work. All those mornings before school. All the hope tied up in one fruit that now sat cracked and dirty in the dark. His mom came out with a raincoat over her nightclothes. She took one look and pressed her lips together. Can we still take it to the fair? Ethan asked. Mark rubbed a hand over his face. If we don't enter it, we lose the shot at the prize. If we do enter it, we have to get it there somehow. Linda looked from the ditch to the wagon by the shed. The old hay wagon had not been used in years. One wheel leaned a little to one side. The paint was almost gone. We can put boards under it, she said. Mark nodded once. At first light, Ethan wanted to say more, but nothing came out. He went back to bed with mud on his boots and the sound of the wind in his ears. Before dawn, the wind had gone, but the ground stayed soft and wet. Ethan got up while the sky was still gray. His sister, June, was already in the kitchen eating toast. Is it bad? She asked. It is bad, Ethan said. June bit her lip. She was 11 and had helped all summer by handing him buckets and keeping birds away with an old metal pie pan. Out in the yard, Mark had hitched the farm truck to the old hay wagon. He and Ethan laid 2 long boards across the wagon bed. Then they brought out the pumpkin. In the morning light, it looked even bigger. The crack near the stem was easy to see now. Mud was packed on the bottom side. One long smear of brown ran down into the split. Easy, Mark said. They used a come-along, 2 chains, and a lot of pushing to get the pumpkin out of the ditch and onto the boards. It did not want to move. The boards creaked. The chain bit into the pumpkin skin. Ethan's arms shook. June held the flashlight, even though the sun was already rising. When the pumpkin finally settled onto the wagon, it leaned a little to one side. Straw stuffed the gap under it. Ethan stepped back and wiped his face with his shirt. She still looks mighty big, June said, trying to smile. Mark gave a tired laugh. Big enough to scare the judge, maybe. They wrapped the cracked side with a clean feed sack and tied it with twine. It was not pretty, but it held the loose part together. Then they drove slowly toward town. The road into Mapleton was only 3 miles, but it felt longer that morning. The truck pulled the wagon at a crawl. The pumpkin sat high on the hay, orange and wet and patched with burlap. Ethan rode in the back with it, one hand on the side to keep it steady. A few people saw them and pointed. 2 boys on bicycles came around the corner and stared with their mouths open. At the gas station, old Mr. Dillard lifted his coffee cup and said, "Well, I'll be." Ethan did not wave. He kept his eyes on the road and his hand on the pumpkin. Every bump made him think the cracked side might split wider. By the time they reached the Maple County Fairgrounds, the sun was up and the parking lot was filling fast. The fair had opened the day before, so the midway rides already spun in bright colors. Flags hung from the fence. The smell of fried dough and popcorn drifted from the food stands. From the livestock barn came the low, steady calls of cattle and sheep. The pumpkin contest was in the exhibit hall near the old 4-hour building. Ethan and Mark backed the wagon into the line of giant pumpkins that had already been entered. Some were round and smooth. Some were pale green. One was striped like a melon. A man in a straw hat was measuring a pumpkin with a tape while a woman wrote down weights on a clipboard. Ethan jumped down from the wagon. His knees felt weak. The woman with the clipboard looked at the cracked pumpkin and raised her eyebrows. Her name tag said, Ruth Keller, County Extension. "You had a rough ride, didn't you?" she said. "The wind got it," Ethan said. Ruth walked around it once and looked at the crack. She touched the side gently with 2 fingers. "It's still solid," she said. We'll make a note of the damage. You can still enter." Ethan let out a breath he had been holding for hours. Mark asked, "Does that ruin its chance?" Ruth shook her head. "Not for every award. The main prize may go to the best shape. But we also have a local growers award this year. The Farm Bureau wanted to honor homegrown entries from around the county. Size matters, but so does the work behind it." Ethan looked at his dad. Mark did not smile, but his face had changed. The tight line around his mouth eased a little. They rolled the pumpkin into place on a pallet near the back wall. Other growers glanced over. Some nodded with respect. One man in overalls said, "That's a good one, crack or not." The fair hall filled as the afternoon went on. Kids pressed close to the glass cases of blue ribbons and jam jars. The lights above the giant pumpkin row came on, one by one, as evening fell. Bright white bulbs glowed against the dark ceiling. The pumpkin looked even larger under those lights, like a small sun that had been left on the floor. Ethan stood beside it in his cleanest jeans and a button shirt. His hands still had dirt in the lines. His stomach felt tight. He had watched other people come and go all day. He had heard the same words again and again. Too much crack, too much mud, maybe too damaged. Good size, though. He knew what that meant. The main prize would likely go to a smooth, perfect pumpkin from another farm. That did not bother him as much as he thought it would. What worried him was the bill waiting at home. At 6 o'clock, Ruth tapped a microphone to get the room quiet. People turned toward the front of the hall. The fair lights shone on faces, on ribbons, on the shiny ribs of the pumpkin row. "We have one more award tonight," Ruth said. "This one is for the local growers class. It's for a crop that shows hard work, care, and a real connection to this county." She looked down at her notes, then back up at the crowd. This year's Local Growers Award goes to Ethan Bradley for the giant pumpkin entered by the Bradley family. For a second, Ethan did not move. The room seemed to tilt around him. Then June gave a small squeal and grabbed his sleeve. "Go on," she said. People began to clap. Ethan walked forward on legs that felt strange and light. He heard someone whistle. He heard his mom laugh once, the surprised kind of laugh that comes after fear lets go. Ruth held out the ribbon first. It was wide and blue with silver writing. Then she handed him an envelope with the check inside. "Congratulations," she said. "This one made it through a hard night. So did you." Ethan looked at the pumpkin as the ribbon was tied around its stem. Under the bright, fair lights, the crack showed plain on the orange skin. The brown line of mud ran down one side. The feed sack patch looked rough and plain, but the ribbon sat right on top of it all, blue and clean and strong. The crowd clapped again. A few people came close to take pictures. One older woman said, "That poor thing sure did travel." Another man said, "Looks like it earned every inch." Mark stood beside Ethan, one hand on the wagon rail. His eyes were wet, though he tried to hide it by looking at the ribbon. "How much?" Ethan asked in a low voice. Mark opened the envelope, checked the check, and gave a short nod. "Enough," he said. Then, after a beat, more than enough. They did not spend the money right away. The fair still had one more hour of noise and lights, and children carrying paper cups of lemonade. But when they got home, Mark called the dealer in town from the kitchen phone. By 9:30, the man had promised the combine part could be ready by morning. The next day, before the heat built up, Mark and Ethan drove to the shop and picked it up. It was a heavy metal piece wrapped in brown paper and tied with wire. The man at the counter slapped the side of the box and said, "That pumpkin did all right for you, huh?" Mark smiled for the first time in days. "It sure did." By noon, the part was in place. Mark started the combine in the yard, and the engine coughed once, then settled into a deep, steady rumble. Ethan stood in the dust with June and Linda beside him. The machine rolled forward a few feet, then turned clean and strong. Out in the field, the corn was ready. Ethan watched the tires cut 2 brown lines across the dirt. The sun was bright. The sky was open and blue. The fair ribbon hung from a nail in the kitchen window, where the morning light hit it and made it shine. The pumpkin sat in the shed now, still cracked, still muddy in places, but no longer just a gamble. It had brought home the money. It had kept the harvest moving. Ethan lifted a hand to shield his eyes and smiled as the combine moved farther into the rows.